real estate transactions. Prior to working with Fidelity, Krista completed her undergraduate work in vocal performance at the University of Nebraska before obtaining her Master's of Music in Vocal Performance from the University of Missouri, Kansas City. Krista then received her Juris Doctor from the University of Kansas. Krista lives in Omaha, Nebraska with her husband and her 2 kids, and she enjoys singing opera and once sang the national anthem for President George Bush. That's pretty cool, Krista.
Cool.
So welcome, Krista.
I took a roundabout way to law school.
I'm wondering if you're going to sing for us before this session is over.
We'll see.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. How is everyone doing today? What I'm going to do, if you just give me a second here, is I'm going to share my screen, and don't mind my kids there. Oh, wrong brand. Wait 1 second. I just had it up and then it decided it wanted to close it on me, probably because I closed it. So what we are going to talk about today is business email compromise leading to wire fraud. And the reason why we're going to focus on, it keeps on doing Tycors. Sorry, wait 1 second.
For those of you that don't know, while Krista's looking at that, Fidelity actually owns multiple brands. So even though Tycor keeps showing up, that is one of our companies.
There we go. Sorry, I just did a Tycor one earlier and it's just all messed up on my computer. I apologize. So what we're going to talk about today is email compromise that leads to wire fraud. And the reason why that is, I really want to focus on the email compromise aspect of it is because that is the cause. Right? Wire fraud is the end game. That's the devastation at the end. So if we want to impact that end result, we have to look at the cause. And all of us are part of the cause, right? It is an industry issue. Too often people say, oh, wire fraud, that's escrow's issue. They deal with money, we don't. Well, the point of the matter is it's not really the money that's at issue. It's us taking care of our email accounts and knowing how the fraudsters are getting in. So what is business email compromise, known as BEC? It's a sophisticated fraud scheme that targets businesses that routinely do wire transfers. Okay, from that definition right there, you could see why real estate is such a large target of these fraudsters. Think about how many wires are transmitted on a daily, weekly, monthly basis related to real estate transactions. Okay, the fraudsters know that. So what they've done is learned our business and figured out a way in. And how they figure out a way in is trolling the internet. Okay, and now in 2020, with our business being the way that it is due to COVID and other technology advances, it even makes fraudsters more aggressive in our real estate transactions. Okay, so they are using what we do every day against us. Right, so for example, what they like to do is troll the internet. Whereas we have regular 9-to-5 jobs and we work really hard at our jobs. And why we say 9 to 5, let's be honest, we don't work 9 to 5. We work 9 to whenever it gets done, right? That's what we're all doing. That's what we all do. The fraudsters are using that time to figure out who the targets are going to be. Okay. And they figure out who their targets are going to be by going to Zillow, Flipkey, LoopNet, Realtor.com, all of those sites that get IDX feeds from the MLS. So approximately every 5 minutes, an IDX feed is sent from the MLS to all of these other sites, and it instantaneously updates those sites with new property listings, change in property statuses. Okay, what other information is located on those sites? Listing agent's contact information. If it's Zillow, you'll see 3 property listings and tons of marketing space filled with mortgage brokers, law firms, real estate agents, title companies, people in the industry that are marketing on those sites. It's like a one-stop shop for the fraudsters to find out who their targets are going to be. To make it even easier for them, there are certain sites. So let's say, I mean, you guys go to realtor.com. I can just say that I'm interested in a property, click that little button that says I'm interested, and within 10 minutes, I have multiple real estate agents sending me an email offering to provide me additional information and to assist me however I can in that, right? That's how they're using how you guys are successful against you guys. They know that the internet and marketing is the way of the future. That's what you guys do. Social media, the use of these types of services. So they'll say, all right, I want to target. I want to pick one of these people who responded to my request for information on this property. Now I'm going to go Google that person. I'm going to go see what social media sites there are. And mind you, since that's a marketing tool, right? It's open to the public. It's open for new people to see so that you can garner new business. And from that, the fraudsters can figure out a lot of information about you. You can figure out, what associations you're affiliated with, what some personal preferences that you like, just personal tidbits that they can then turn around and use to spearfish you. All of us have been spearfished at some point, whether you knew it or not. If you have an Amazon account, and let's be honest, no one got through 2020 without an Amazon account, right? And with that, you got that email that looked like it came from Amazon that said, we need you to update your information. Click this link. If you would click that link, what it would do is it'd pop up a window and a web page would come up that looks a lot like Amazon. And they would want you to put in your credential information. And from that right there, the fraudsters have your login information from Amazon. And in that type of fraud, they're then logging into your account and spending a whole bunch of your money, right? Well, in this type of fraud, they don't want you to know that you've been compromised. So what they'll do is they'll send something like that, or they'll pretend to be a prospective new client. And they'll send you an email with an attachment. And that attachment will be embedded with malware. So as soon as you open that attachment, boom, they have access to your account. That's how easy it is for these fraudsters. And look, we don't want you to change how you're doing business. We want you to be successful. We just want you to be aware of it, right? Knowing is half the battle. That's what we learned from G.I. Joe a long time ago, and we just need to stick with that, right? So be aware that the fraudsters are using this and what can happen, and think about ways that you can try and minimize the risk. That's what this whole day, this whole next hour is about, is knowing, recognizing, and minimizing. And it's important that we focus on the minimization aspect because you can't eliminate it, right? We don't control enough of the factors. You don't control what type of email server the transaction participants use. You don't control what kind of security they have on that email account. And you also don't get to choose how they respond to emails that they receive. And because of that, all we can do is hope to educate and make everyone recognize what happens. And it all starts with you guys, quite honestly. This is an industry issue, as I mentioned before. And so we're relying on you all to pass that information on to your clients, since you have so much more contact with your clients. Okay. So what they do now, they have a target, right? It's any of you on the call. It's all of us, right? And they're going to send that email, and let's say they gain access because they found out, they got you to click that link, they got you to open that attachment, or they guessed your password, because let's be honest, we aren't necessarily the best at coming up with complex passwords, right? And now they're in your account. So what do? They sit and learn. Okay. They learn about everything involved in that transaction that originally maybe made you the target, and as well as any other transaction that you're involved in. Okay. And then they determine whose role everyone's going to be, because everyone in the transaction is used in some manner. You've got you as the target, then you've got the victim. Over 70% of the time, the victim is going to be the buyer. Okay. Then they've got the transaction participants that just help the fraud along, the escrow officers, the loan officers, the attorneys, if there's one involved, mortgage brokers, anyone. And then what they do is they determine who they're going to pretend to be, and they send an email to the intended victim. All right, that initial communication is more than likely not going to have wire instructions right off the bat. They're going to try and lure in the victim. They're going to have some generic type of communication related to the transaction. They might do what I call stack spoofing, which is when they include other participants in the courtesy copy, such as, let's say they're pretending to be the escrow officer. They'll go ahead and courtesy copy one of you as a real estate agent, but that'll also be a spoofed email address. The only real email address will be to the victim. So what do I mean by a spoofed email address? Well, I kind of equate it to an imitation handbag. It looks a lot like the real thing. There's just some slight variations, right? If you look fast enough, you miss it. That's kind of what they're going for. It is just a close proximity to the actual email address of the person they're supposed to be, or they make it appear that it is a person they are trying to impersonate. Okay, I'll show you some examples here in a second. But that's how most of these communications start, with those spoofed emails. And then the spoofed email eventually, as the victim engages in the communication, will eventually receive fraudulent wire instructions. Those fraudulent wire instructions will be to a mule account. Almost all the time, it's a domestic mule account that is in some manner controlled by the fraudster. And when I first started doing this about 4 years ago, you had about 36 to 48 hours after the wire was sent until it left that mule account, right? Because what the fraudsters do then is disperse it from that mule account in various wires internationally. Well, now you're lucky if you have 24 hours. I've seen over $300,000 gone in 4 hours of the wire being sent. That's how fast these fraudsters are. And once those funds leave that mule account, the chance of recovery is a big fat zero. Okay. So what they also do is send these large phishing emails. So what I said before was like a targeted attack, right? That was a spear phishing attack. That's just at you. But what they've started doing is using generic phishing. And by the way, in 2020, it was reported that phishing schemes had something like a 600% increase in reported instances. It's just blown up. And once again, think about the times. More of us are working virtually. More of us are relying more on our emails and our computers than we had before. So it makes sense. The fraudsters are following our working trends. Okay. So, but what they do then with these is it's a big old blast to multiple parties that are all going to receive the exact same email. And how they get your guys' contact information is from marketing firms. Yes, marketing firms gather all of our contact information within certain regions and certain niches. And so they'll reach out to one of these marketing firms and say, the fraudsters will, and say, hey, get me everyone involved in the real estate market in this region. And then the marketing firm will give it to them. They'll pay for that information. And then the fraudsters will send out emails like this. This same email was sent across multiple states over several days. Okay. One thing that you can see, there's some glaring obvious points. One, they're going to pretend to be someone trusted in the industry. Okay. That's what they're going to do. They're going to rely on the goodwill of those companies. But look at the actual sender. Lori at nippers.com, which by the way, sounds like a really fun domain. I don't know what it is, but it sounds fun. But see that, look at how the subject line, highly generic. Even the body of the email, extremely generic. Another thing to look at is look at the fact that the to and the from are the same person. When you see that in your email box, that's a very strong indicator that it's being mass sent to multiple parties. And you can't see them because they blind copied everyone.
Can you repeat that, Krista? The blind copy part? Because I didn't get that. I was showing.
Yeah, no worries. If you see in the to and the from,
yeah,
how it's the same name.
Oh yeah. Okay.
That's a sign that it's a blast send.
Okay. See
because all the actual intended recipients are blind copied, so you can't see who it got sent to.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in addition to that, because that's not enough, the fraudsters also, once they are gaining access into their email accounts, quite honestly, they got tired with getting kicked out by people doing password changes. So they're like, well, how can we outsmart people? And they're like, haha, email rules. Every single email provider has a rules option within it. And the benefit from a fraudster's perspective is they can gain access to an email account, go into the email rules, set up an auto forward that forwards all incoming and outgoing emails. They can send it to another email account that they have complete control over. Okay. And the greatest thing is if someone changes their password, that rule is not deleted. People have to actively go into your email rules to make any changes and to delete them, which the fraudsters know most people don't do on a regular basis. Some people don't even know how to access their email rules.
I don't.
Yeah, and that's normal, right? The good thing is you can Google how to do it for whatever type of email provider that you have, and it'll walk you through the steps on how to do it. The bad thing is you have to be on a desktop. You can't do it on your smart device.
Wow. Okay.
It won't let you do it. Another strong point for the fraudsters, right? Because let's be honest, how often do those of us actually go to a desktop and look at our email and look at that aspect of it? So I would encourage you to make it a habit of do it. I would go ahead and set up a calendar reminder so that maybe every 2 weeks you get on a desktop and you look at your email rules and make sure that there is nothing set up that you did not set up yourself. And if you do see something like that, it should be deleted immediately. Okay. So this is an example of a spoofed email. So as you can see, they're pretending to be an escrow officer and they're playing on the domain of Fidelity. But instead of it actually coming from fnf.com, which is a correct domain for anyone within the Fidelity family, it's actually fn-f.info. This right here is an example of a contact name spoof. The reason why is because they're using an email address that is not actually affiliated with that contact, but they're putting that contact's name there. So if I received an email and I'm looking at it through this, I'm just going to see the escrow officer's name. That's all I'm going to see. I'm not going to see the email address, right? So that's what they're counting on. They're trying to go on the goodwill. This is also an example of that stack spoofing that I mentioned. This email is supposed to go to the mortgage broker, trying to divert lenders' proceeds. But here, boom, look at that. Look at the courtesy copy. They have went ahead and spoofed the lender, the escrow assistant, other people in hopes to help legitimize the communication. Okay. Now, just so you all know, on your phone, if you are looking at it, you can click. All right. When you get a name, it just shows the person's name, right? If you click it and hit it, it turns blue. If you hit it again, then a window shows up and it'll actually show the email address of the sender. For this type of spoof, a contact name spoof, that works for you to help legitimize and show that, oh yes, this person really did send me what they meant. You know, this is a legitimate email. However, this next one is not so simple. This is called a header spoof. If you look at that upper left corner there, there's no way for you to tell that that is not a legitimate email. It came from fnf.com, right? Looks real. But look what you hit reply. Look what email address shows up.
Oh.
This is a header spoof. They've actually hidden the actual sending email address and they're just showing you what they want to show you, basically. Okay. There's even one that's more sophisticated than this, that even if I hit reply, it would still show Krista.Christensen@fnf.com. Okay. So one way to get around this type of spoofing, or just concern of spoofing in general, is to stop using reply in emails. I know, it's the easiest thing, right? It's really easy. Just someone gets an email and then hit reply and then type back.
Krista, I have a question. You just talked about how if you were on your cell phone and you hit this Christensen at fnf.com, would it not pull up? Would it not pull up as that other email address?
Not for a header spoof. It will not.
Oh shit.
I know, right?
Yeah.
I know.
Because I just did on my phone while you were doing this, I pulled up the email that I got from Vivian. See? Vivian, see how it says Vivian Chia? And I pushed on it, and when I did, it pulled up on my phone.
Yep.
That's how you know it's real.
Right. That is one way to tell. Yes. However,
but not on this one.
Yes. If they're doing a more sophisticated, which by the way, this is least used. They tend to use the contact name spoof, but we are seeing this used more.
Yeah.
And one way to get around it is, like I said, kind of see if we can change our thought process and maybe not hit reply. I know that's the easiest way to do it, but if instead you hit forward and type back in the contact information of who you want to respond to, that way you can ensure that you're really emailing who you mean to email. And it might put everyone on notice that something isn't quite right, right? So because that's not enough, why would it be? There's also caller ID spoofing. Okay, at any time I could call any of you and it can be anyone's number and it can show up as anyone's name, and I can change my voice to female to male as needed. So I want us to think about for a second the impact that could have on a real estate transaction, right? Where the consumer, the buyers, the sellers, they very rarely are they going to recognize the escrow officer's voice, the lender's voice. So if they get a call purportedly from one of those trusted parties that tells them, hey, we need you to change wire instructions. Here's our new wire instructions. See how easy it would be for the consumer to fall for it? Because they've got a caller ID that shows that it's Krista Christensen from Fidelity.
Wow.
Right? So one way to get around that is developing passcodes, pass phrases, things of that nature, and doing so at the beginning of the transaction and doing it offline. So doing it through phone conversations, for in person, if you can manage to do that in this time of in this day, right? And make it something that's not related to the real estate transaction, because I hate to tell you, you can leave a zip code off of an email, but all you have to do is Google the address and voila, the fraudsters have the zip code. So, make it like, what color is my shirt? My shirt is pink. Something along those lines that's completely random, but then that's a way that everyone can verify that they are in fact who they say they are if people are being asked to verify sensitive or private information through a phone call. Because it's quite possible that someone from Fidelity National would call a seller, let's say, because we need to verify wire instructions before we wire out proceeds. But maybe it's someone that the seller hasn't communicated with, previously in the transaction. So they went ahead and, the seller's like, I'm not going to give you my bank information. How do I know you're really with Fidelity National? If you have those passcodes set up, that might clear up that confusion and allow that verification process to occur. Also, just know that the fraudsters are increasing their efforts by what's called vishing and smishing, which are kind of fun words to say. Vishing is phishing through phone calls, and smishing is phishing through text messages. It gets kind of confusing, but basically that they're all phishing attempts. It's just the vehicle using to drive them. They call email attempts phishing, phone call attempts vishing, and text message attempts smishing. Okay. Just so you know, one thing that I would do, talk with your Fidelity National Title escrow officers, your sales execs, find out how they do business, how they communicate with clients in a transaction, so you can learn that and pass that knowledge on to your clients. So you can let them know, hey, Fidelity National Title is not going to text message you. They're not going to provide you wire instructions via text. They're not going to sit there and send you an email in the morning and say you must wire by 1 p.m. that day. You know, things of that nature, so that they know what to expect. And if they see any of that, hopefully your communications with them will make the light bulb snap on and they don't fall victim to the fraud. This is where we can all help each other. Okay. So now, why 4 years later am I still in this position? Why am I still talking about email compromise leading to wire fraud? These headlines are the reason why. These headlines come up every week.
Krista, we have a question in the chat. And it says, are you talking about email rules? Haven't heard of that. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah. So email rules, like I said, go ahead and Google it, because how to access your rules is different depending on what type of email provider you use. But go ahead, and if you use Gmail, if you use, something that is maybe a business one that's processed by GoDaddy or something along those lines, you can Google it and say, how to access email rules for Gmail. And then boom, a list will come up and tell you what you have to do to see what is in your email rules and how to create email rules. But with regards to this, look at these numbers. Okay. This is why I'm still talking about it. The Internet Crime Complaint Center just came out with their 2020 numbers. And interestingly enough, there were less complaints filed in 2020 than in 2019, but more losses reported in 2020 than there were in 2019. Now, the reason for that, there's a couple reasons, but I would say that a large factor is more buyers are purchasing in cash, not using lenders. Also, there's been a big influx on payoff fraud attempt. So the fraudsters trying to go after the funds that are intended to pay off whatever loan is on the property. Those are both significant amounts of money. And so that's where you get the increase in losses. Let's see here. I just saw an email. Different scam just found a brand new listing being advertised for rent. Scammer copy. Yep. And that's exactly what any of you can go in the chat room and see what this example is. Things like that. That's what happens. This is how I said they'll use what information is on the internet and then try and benefit from it. We see this renter scam a lot, actually, with properties that are for sale. Okay. Just so you all know, BEC, business email compromise, is over $1.2 billion more in losses than the next reported internet crime. That's crazy. This isn't going away. This is far more lucrative than anything else. I think that they said something like this is 6 times more lucrative than the drug trade or something along those lines. And let's be honest, we've been in a war on drugs since the 80s, right? That's how lucrative this is. The average successful bank robbery nets about $4,000. Every time I say that, I think of the movie Point Break, and I think of jumping out of a plane for $4,000. And that seems a little, that risk reward doesn't seem beneficial in my mind. Well, the average BEC nets over $140,000 a pop. And they don't have to leave their couch. They don't even have to put on pants. It's like made for COVID, right? That's how successful it is. So now that I've given you the doom and gloom, the good news is there are ways to recognize this fraud. The bad thing is the fraudsters know we are extremely busy and that we go. So we are apt to miss all those ways to recognize it, right? What is important for all of us to recognize is that the reason why this fraud scheme is so prevalent is because we are a society of skimmers. We don't really read emails, right? Think about how many times you've gotten an email, you've thought you've read it. I mean, you mean to read it, right? It's not like you're trying to ignore people that send you emails. And then you see a question mark. And so you go back to the beginning of the email and read it again because you didn't really read it. Right? That's what the fraudsters are counting on. So the first thing for us to be cognizant of is the fact that all money's fair game. Okay, the fraudsters will go after every bit of money involved in a real estate transaction. They started with seller's proceeds. As an industry, we got better protocols internally that made it not so successful. So they moved on to the buyer side. Quite honestly, they haven't left the buyer side. The buyers are the hardest to protect and the most vulnerable from this crime because this is not their business. It might be a one-off. This might be the first time that they've ever purchased a home. It may have been the last time, may have been over a decade ago, and things are so much different now. Okay, so unfortunately, the fraudsters are playing on that. All right, they've gone after lenders' funds. I mentioned payoff fraud. They also go after commissions. Like I said, nothing is too small. They'll go after any bit that they can. Okay, some common indicators. One thing that I want you guys to really think about for yourself and also pass on to your consumers is escrow companies are not going to change their banking information in the middle of a transaction. We're just not going to do it. It is less painful to break bones in your body than to change banking information. Okay, so anytime your consumers, your clients get a communication, whether it be a phone call, a text message, an email, saying that for any reason we're changing bank information, that should be a red flag. That should be the sign for everyone to stop what they're doing and pick up the phone and using a known trusted number, never a phone number from the email chain. Call that sender and verify the legitimacy of that email or that communication. Okay. The fraudsters know you guys are busy. They know how much you guys want to get those transactions closed at the end of the month, right? They also know that Fridays, they want to get that wire transfer out on a Friday if they can, especially if there's a 3-day weekend coming up. Because those days over the weekend, no one can recall a wire during that time, but they can remove funds from the account in question during that time. So that's how they pull out that money before anyone can do anything about it. Okay, grammatical issues. Okay, by now we're all aware of that email that has like the body of it's one paragraph, like one run-on sentence, and the only thing capitalized is and, right? We got that one. Well, what about if your transaction participants, maybe English isn't their first language? Maybe they're of a younger generation who likes to use emojis, right? Used to text messages and doesn't draft full sentences in their emails. If all of a sudden you start getting communications in which it's in full-fledged sentence, proper grammar, that's also a red flag. Understand the fraudsters copy and paste communications from other transactions and insert them into yours. Okay, so if you guys question, if you see something, you're like, huh, what? Trust yourself. Pick up the phone and call and encourage your clients to do the same thing. Okay. What tends to happen to the buyers in these scenarios is a pressure to take action quickly. What typically happens is they'll get a communication early in the morning and say that they need to get a wire out that day to avoid a closing delay. And the fraudster will just pound on them. They'll send multiple emails. They'll send texts if they got their hands on the phone number. They'll call. They'll do whatever they can to try and get that person to send those funds that day. Okay. And the buyers typically have two responses. They either one, call you guys and complain about why Krista in escrow keeps on bothering me and won't leave me alone and asks me to wire funds. And then you in turn call me and yell at me until I say, whoa, what are you talking about? I haven't emailed. And then it's determined that there's fraud being attempted. Or the buyers will just go ahead and wire the funds because they're sick of hearing from me and be done with it. And typically the problem with that is typically those scenarios happen at least a week before closing. And by the time anyone finds out that those funds were sent, it's too late to get the funds back. You're well outside that 24-hour period. Okay. Anytime that you get, someone says, hey, I need to change my email address, or we can no longer accept cashier's checks. That's something that the fraudsters are relying on a lot right now. Say, we can't accept it. You have to wire. Anytime you or your clients receive that, We've also seen the fraudsters trying to use cash apps in their attempts, and they'll go ahead and send an email to the buyer saying that they can do their closing funds via PayPal. Cash App, which is kind of like a, if any of you use Venmo, it's kind of like a Venmo scenario, or even Zelle, which is an electronic payment system that banks use. Remind, if you see that in any communications, or if your client tells you that, right away, that should be bells and whistles, something's wrong, because escrow actually can't use any of those features. You can't use Zelle, you can't use PayPal, you can't use any of that because it doesn't comport with good fund laws. You can't track where it came from. Lenders don't accept it. So that, just be aware that's something that's happening. And unfortunately, we've seen some instances where people have fallen for it. Okay. So speaking of COVID, fraudsters are using it. They're liking it. They're going to run with it. And this email right here, I see about 5 to 10 times a week across the country, everywhere, pretty much verbatim in the body of the email. Okay. Highly generic, but the fraudsters found out early that if they say, due to COVID, our procedures need to change, boom, no one questions it. Everyone believes exactly what's happened because so much has had to change due to COVID. Look at the spoofed email addresses. This is another trend that they're starting to do. Instead of just trying to mimic whoever they're trying to pretend to be and impersonate at that time, they're using highly generic real estate related terms as their email addresses. And really they're using it for an ease factor for them, because now that closing at escrowclosingdepartment.co, that email address they can use to impersonate multiple people across multiple transactions in multiple states. And it all goes into one inbox for them. So they don't have to sit there and toggle between multiple inboxes to do their fraud. Okay, here's an example again of the stack spoofing where they pretended to be courtesy copy the real estate agent on there. That must be make it legit, right? Here's one of the first ones I saw. And the reason why I always like to point this one out is because of that middle paragraph, the longer paragraph. We will no longer be accepting cashier's checks or any form of personal checks. They're using COVID as a reason to force wires. Your state is not one of the states that requires closing funds to be in the form of a wire. Understand that. Remind your clients of that. Okay, that they have options. They don't have to wire funds. Is it the easiest, fastest way? Yes, but it's not the only way. They aren't just using COVID. They're using just plain old fraud attempts. This is one of the first signs that we see that a compromise has occurred. And unfortunately, many times the real estate agents don't realize that they are being spoofed and they are part of the fraud until after the diversion has at least been attempted. So what you'll get is you'll get an email for someone impersonating the escrow officer, and they'll ask for the buyer's contact information. This communication typically happens well into the transaction. So now most of the time, everyone of these that I've seen after the fact, the real estate agent was like, I should have known. I've been included in emails between escrow and the real estate and the buyer before this. I just didn't think, because I saw communication asking for this contact information, customer service oriented. So I provided the information that was requested. And what happens after the response is provided? The fraudster then pretends to be the escrow officer and sends an email to the buyer, starting the diversion process. This is another example where they're pretending to be the escrow officer and sending this to the buyer. Look at it, highly generic. You will find some that are very specific because of whoever the compromised party is, they have enough information to make it highly specific. But a lot of times they're generic like this, because once again, they're just trying to get that victim to respond. They're trying to lure them in, and they don't need all the information. They just need enough to be convincing. And so that's what they do here. Look, closing docs, they note the file's closing. Why do they know the closing files? The file's getting ready to close? Well, remember, they've been monitoring email accounts. That's one way they could know. Or two, because they have been watching people's social media and they see when Susie Buyer has been tagged in something on Facebook saying we're doing our final inspection for our, for our closing scheduled in 3 days. They have an exact timeline now of when the closing happens and when they should strike. Okay. Once again, highly generic email account used. And look, the buyer responded back. And this one, the buyer even questioned because, hey, shouldn't I just send it exactly where I sent the EMD? And weird. Nope. Updated closing instructions. Doesn't even give a reason why we're updating it, but nope. Updated closing instructions. And there's an amount. And then, hey, bring your checkbook. We'll refund you any excess at closing. They don't even have final figures yet. But people are falling for this. Even without having loan docs finalized, without having any of those final figures, people get caught up in what's going on and they wire funds. Okay. Here's another one. This time they're pretending to be the settlement agent. Look at the spoofed email address. They spelled professional wrong, right? Once again, notice, very generic. All they had to know was that a closing was happening, right? This one, they actually courtesy copied and spoofed the real estate agent as well. So now the fraudster's responding back to that email, pretending to be the real estate agent. So now the buyers are even more encouraged to believe this is legitimate because not only the escrow officer has responded, but the real estate agent, two parties that they thoroughly trust in the real estate transaction. But look at the email address actually used. There's an I missing. Look at the email address in the body of the email. The fraudsters didn't even try and make a match because they know people aren't paying attention to email addresses. And look, say, oh, okay, can you wire funds today? Then the buyer responds back, oh, no, wait, I'm out of town. I can't do it until Wednesday. Fraudster jumps in, oh, Wednesday's fine. And then without further prompting, on Wednesday, the fraudster sends wire instructions with the amount needed to close. That's what your clients are seeing. That's how real it looks from their perspective. Here's another one. Now they're pretending to be the real estate agent. Now, and we've seen this about 4 or 5 times. I don't know if it's going to take off. I don't know if they've kind of given it a rest, but then they'll just courtesy copying this Christine@escrowsclosings.com. That email address has been reported over multiple states. That Christine has never once been affiliated with the transaction in any manner. It's just a straw person that they've inserted into it to once again make it appear more legitimate. And sometimes that Christine pops in and responds. Okay. And in this one, look, final figures. On this one, it can be presumed that whoever was a compromised party had a copy of the final CD and pulled the final figures from that. So what can we do? How can we do that? How can we minimize this from being successful, right? Well, the largest thing we have going for us is the fact that we are humans and we do want to talk to each other, regardless of the fact that most of the time we talk through screens now, right? Our text messages. But education is the best defense to this matter. Okay, we need to all work together to make sure that consumers are aware of what's transpiring. They make sure that they know, hey, wire fraud is happening. And because of that, it's important for you to know how the escrow company that you are closing with, how they do business. This is what they do. They use this platform. They send these types of communication. They'll call, they'll do this, they'll do that. Go through the timing of when closing funds will need to be sent. Have that conversation with them because like I said, it may be business to us, but it's personal to them. Make sure that they're aware. And the biggest thing that we can do is we need to kind of turn a key in our thought process so we stop assuming emails are legitimate. It's weird if you think about it because emails, we all know they're inherently not secure. That's why we actually have to pay to get programs to have secure transmissions, right? That's one. But two, we don't trust anything nowadays, right? We are as distrustful as we've ever been in society. And yet we constantly see emails for real estate transactions in which people you don't really know are asking for life savings, and people are just saying, oh, sure, why not? So we need to stop that assumption. And instead, think about how you would look at an email differently if you assumed it was not legitimate. Instead, you'd probably pay a little bit closer attention to the email address. You'd probably read that body a little bit more closely and catch more red flags. You'd question things that didn't seem right or didn't add up, right? And if you had any questions, you could pick up the phone and call the sender to verify the information. Okay? And whenever possible in a transaction, I encourage you all to talk with them outside of electronic communication. Talk with the clients, talk with the escrow officers. Make sure everyone's on the same page, right? Because as much as millennials may be, you know, a lot of who's driving the market as far as resales and things of that nature, and as tech savvy and as tech based as they are, a lot of them actually still want to talk to someone on the phone and converse with someone related to the purchases of homes, because it's scary and it's big and they have no clue what's going on. Right? So just take that opportunity to talk to them about wire fraud, to remind them, hey, you know, you are never supposed to wire funds without calling Fidelity National first and verifying those wire instructions with them. You need to make sure you do that, right? Another thing that we should try and do is limit that transmission of information between the parties who really need it. For so long, we got so used to hitting reply all and including everyone on everything. Well, there's privacy laws around now that weren't around 5 years ago. There's risks around now that weren't around 5 years ago. So it makes doing that and continuing to work like that not necessarily the best practices anymore, right? Because think of it this way. If I hit reply all and every single communication is going to everyone, then that means if someone's compromised, the fraudster is getting every tidbit of information that they will in turn turn around and use against the intended victim. Okay? That's why Fidelity National, we are going to want to send wire instructions directly to your clients. We aren't going to want to send them to you, not because we want to take you out of the equation, but because we want that streamline. It is far less likely to be diverted and to be intercepted if it's between two parties versus if it's going through the chain. Think of it as when you used to play telephone as a kid. Think about how 5 people in, that message got completely screwed up. That's the same thing that can happen with emails as they get passed from party to party to party to party. We need to be proactive with how we handle technology. Let's be honest, most of us don't understand half of what we're doing on the internet are with our computers, right? Well, that's why there's all these cyber and IT professionals that can tell us what they're doing in layman's terms, right? We need to work closely with them. Make sure that all your systems are up to date. Patch everything often and as needed. I mean, heck, just with, you know, Apple support, we got 2 critical updates for the Apple iOS platform within a week of each other due to vulnerabilities that they found. That's how fast things are going, right? If you do not have 2-factor authentication, also called multi-factor authentication, enabled on your email accounts, I'd encourage you, as soon as we're off of this, to go ahead and do it. All the platforms offer it. If you don't know how to engage it or get it started, Google. That'll help you for whatever platform you have. But basically what it does is it says anytime you log on to something from a first time, like from a new device or an unknown IP address, you're going to have to put in your username and your password, and then it's going to send a 6-digit code to the mobile phone attached to that account, and you're going to have to enter that account in before it'll actually let you access your emails. Okay. We need to regularly change our passwords. Like every 90 days, you guys should be changing your passwords up. I know that's cumbersome. There are password managers that can help manage all of that. But look in Google what the current requirements or recommendations are for passwords from cybersecurity experts, because they constantly change as they learn new things, as fraudsters get better at doing, their decoding of passwords. Be wary of free Wi-Fi. Okay, understand that there is a risk with free Wi-Fi, and the biggest one being man in the middle. So think of man of a middle. Let's say you go to your local Starbucks and you're gonna go ahead and use their Wi-Fi. Think of man of a middle as a film that goes over and covers the Starbucks Wi-Fi connection. And what that film is going to do is capture every bit of information that you enter into your computer. So if you're doing banking while you're there, it's captured in all your login information for your bank account. If you're dealing on transactions and you type in sensitive information for a client, or you're providing any of that information, boom, the fraudsters have that. They also have your passwords that you've used to access any of the websites that you've done through that session. Okay, so if you are going to a public place and using a private, a free Wi-Fi, such as the airport, hotels, any of that, I encourage you to use a virtual private network, otherwise known as a VPN. Okay, yes, you have to purchase it, but it is a way to ensure that you have that security. Okay, remember that anytime that you log into, let's say you went to Starbucks last week and you used their Wi-Fi. If I go back into Starbucks again, that Wi-Fi is automatically going to pick up Starbucks Wi-Fi if my Wi-Fi connectivity is on my phone. Okay, so if you aren't using your Wi-Fi connection or your Bluetooth, I encourage you to remember to turn it off, because it is possible for people to intercept your transfer of data through those devices and through those capabilities. Now, I mentioned privacy laws previously. I just want us to remember we are in a different world right now, and people's personal information is pretty much their life now, right? So if you do not have the capability to send emails or documents securely through email, then you just shouldn't have that information on your email account. You shouldn't be transmitting it. That's just the way it is. Good news is if you do, if you receive a smart mail email from Fidelity, the email response back, that's automatically secured because you're within that portal. So you have that capability there. But also certain email providers also do have a form of a secure email, a way to send secure emails. It's just embedded into their Gmail has a version of protection embedded into its system. So you may want to just Google that for whatever type of email provider you have and see if they do have any embedded securities for sending secure communications out. But I also want to remind you to provide Fidelity National Title or whatever escrow company you're doing business with, provide them with known telephone numbers and contact information for your buyers and your sellers. Again, we're not trying to take you out of the equation. It just helps with that direct contact. Not only that, but as we're moving to a digital platform for closings, which I'll mention here shortly, we need that information to start that digital platform. I mentioned the forward versus, rather than reply. And I also mentioned the passwords and the passphrases and codes already. So I won't spend any more time on that. But also, if you guys receive unsolicited mail, like that phishing email that I showed you at the beginning of the transaction, look, don't open it. Don't click on a link. Delete it. If you do happen to click on a link or open it and realize after the fact, oh, I shouldn't have done that. You're not alone. That happens to everyone, right? So contact your IT, whoever handles your IT for you, or if you need to go to, even a real geek, something like that, just have them scan your computers, make sure everything is okay, because it is incredibly easy for malware to be embedded on your computing device through those types of emails. You should also regularly purge your emails, because if you do become compromised, the fraudster is going to go through every single bit of email, including whatever in your side folders, to gather additional information to use against you or to use against your contacts. Okay. Now I understand that a lot of you are required to keep certain documentation for a certain period of time related to your closings. That is where it is good to go ahead and use a cloud-based system. Get it out of your actual email and instead store it in a cloud-based system so that you can adhere to whatever requirements you have to for a reporting standpoint, but you don't make it easy picking if a fraudster does gain access to your email accounts. Okay. Also, I want to remind you, yes, I'll provide the slides to the crew there, and you guys can go ahead and pass it on to the clients afterwards. So you guys don't have to worry about taking screenshots or anything like that. One thing that we see a lot of is blind forwards. Oh, whoops, sorry, I pushed a button. Blind forwards. And what I mean by that is that we'll see an email that gets sent out to the real estate agent purportedly from the escrow officer with wire instructions on it. And the real estate agent will just go ahead and forward that to their clients because let's be honest, you guys aren't wiring funds to us, right? It's your client that's wiring funds. What I want to encourage you all to do is before you hit that forward is to independently verify that information. First off, Fidelity National Title is not going to send you our wire instructions. At a typical transaction, it's not going to happen, right? If for some reason it does need to happen based on the facts of that particular transaction, open the attachment, pick up the phone, call Fidelity National Title, and verify the banking information before you even think about passing it on. Because there's several of these matters where if the blind forward hadn't have happened, the fraud would never have happened. It would have never occurred because they would have opened the wire instructions and they would have said, why are they telling me to send it to Michael W. Smith? Things of that nature, things that a consumer doesn't necessarily think about, but you, based on your years of experience and knowledge with real estate transactions, would be, no, these funds need to go to Fidelity National Title. Now, that being said, please bear in mind that payee matching is not a requirement with wire transfers. Therefore, it is possible for you to get a fraudulent wire instructions that says Fidelity National Title as the beneficiary, when in fact the bank account that those funds will be going into is not a Fidelity National Title account. The reason why that is allowed is because wire transfers are governed by the UCC. And the UCC, first off, it was developed several years ago. And the purpose of that was to make sure that personal goods and consumer goods could be transferred right away and that there isn't an issue with waiting for payment to occur. And they needed a way to make sure that if your account is under Krista A. Christensen, and I said put the wire as Krista Christensen, that wire still goes through. They don't want it to bounce back. So what the UCC says that is if the names do not match, they don't even have to, as long as they do not have direct knowledge that the name on the wire and the account are in fact two different people, they're allowed to rely on the account number. And if that's a valid account number, that wire goes through. Okay. So that is why it's very important for the next point. And that is that you just basically beat it into your client's head that they should never wire funds without calling Fidelity National Title or whatever escrow company you're doing business with and verifying that bank information with them. And it should be using a known trusted number. So it shouldn't be a number from an email account. It should be the number that's maybe listed on the contract, maybe from a website, maybe that you provided them yourself. But I can't stress that enough. If you learn nothing else from this presentation, please learn that. Also, look, when these diversions happen, if it is successful and those funds do go to that mule account and it's not caught in time, expect litigation. That's their only recourse. And just to let you know, there has been litigation in which the real estate agent who was the source of compromise was found 85% liable for the buyer's loss. There's a Kansas case, Bain versus Platinum Realty Company. And in that case, the real estate agent actually didn't represent the buyer. They were the listing agent, but they were compromised and an email was sent to the buyer with fraudulent wire instructions from the real estate agent's account. The buyer relied on those, wired out $197,000. All the money was gone. The buyer sued everyone. Everyone else settled out. The real estate agent carried it through trial, and the jury found 85% liable, and the real estate agent was ordered to pay $167,000. Okay. So a standard warning notice like this may come in handy as part of your email. Now, I encourage you not to use full sentences because let's be honest, people don't read full sentences, right? I would encourage you to make it bold, make it stand out, and also to put it above your signature line. And the reason why is, one, make it part of the, part of the communication rather than an afterthought. But also, let's be honest, you're lucky if people are reading to your email, to your signature line. They are not reading below it. I don't care what interesting facts you have under there. It's just not happening, right? So if you do not currently employ this, I would encourage you to do so. Also, just really quick, I want to talk about the forms that Fidelity National Title sends to your clients as part of this transaction. The one on the left is our wire safe form. And this one is designed to be sent early on in the real estate transaction and directly and exclusively to your buyer. It talks about the risks of wire fraud. It provides the wire instructions that they should use. It states that these instructions are the only instructions that they receive and they will never change. It provides a place for them to sign acknowledging that they've received of it. Now, this form may be sent in a variety of ways. If the in here, which is our digital platform, is used, and start in here is used, which is our digital opening package, it will be sent as part of that digital package. Otherwise, it'll be sent via secure method to the buyer. Okay, so please, recommend to your clients, hey, you'll be getting an email, you'll be getting a communication from Fidelity National with wire instructions. Keep those safe. Those are the only ones you'll use throughout the remainder of the transaction. Okay, the form on the right is just think of it as just a little update form in a place where the consumer can go ahead and put down important phone numbers so that they can verify information later. But this, once again, it just talks about the wire fraud, what's going on. And that form is available either in the offices or any of your sales executives that are on this phone call can provide it to you so that you can provide it to your clients. So I mentioned this before, Start in Here is part of our In Here digital platform. This is the entire In Here movement is a completely digitized closing from start to finish. And Start in Here is the beginning of it. I think I kind of relate it to like TurboTax because it gets sent to the buyer. They go to a secure website. They have to have a password for it. They set up, and then it goes through some questions that escrow needs to help get everything going. And then it does provide that wire safe form, a digitized version of it. So that is where the wire instructions will be provided. So the good thing that you can tell your clients is that Start Here is going to happen. Your wire instructions will never come via email. You have to log on to the site and access it through the website. That's how you get those wire instructions. That's a big distinction because if you can tell people, hey, you're never going to get wire instructions from Fidelity National Title via email, boom, as soon as they do get one, hopefully, once again, the light bulb goes on and they stop and say, whoa, something's wrong here. Okay. But all of the your wonderful sales execs here, they can talk to you more about the In Here platform and what your consumers and clients should expect as part of that process. So I talked a little bit about marketing. I just want you all to be aware of the risks that it poses. We don't want you to stop. We want you to be as successful as you can be. One thing that I would like to encourage you guys to think about is if you do what I call Insta marketing on social media feeds, is maybe consider delaying that. And what I coin Insta marketing is when in the middle of a transaction, you'll tag Susie Buyer and say, we're doing our inspection for our final walkthrough, our final walkthrough it for the closing in 3 days, something along those lines. If you could wait and post all that and market after the transaction is finalized, that can help screw up the timeline from a fraudster's perspective, because it could be that that's what they're watching to find out where things are in the transaction. For example, we had a situation where a transaction was bumped up 2 weeks due to some issues, and the buyer closed on the home 2 weeks early. It wasn't communicated electronically. 48 hours before the original closing date, the buyers received an email purportedly from the escrow officer asking for closing funds. Right? It was pretty easy at that point to know something was wrong because they already own the home. Right? Know that they'll go to your company websites and that they'll use information to use that against you. They may try and pretend to be a manager within your company and try and get you guys to buy, iTunes gift cards, things of that nature, and provide them the numbers via email, things of that nature. Know that out of office details can be used against parties. Your escrow officer may be going on vacation and says, "Hey, I'm out of office, July 1st through the 14th. Krista will be handling my files in that, during that time." And then all of a sudden you get some emails that look like they're from that escrow officer during that time period. You have no one to verify that information with during that time, right? So just be on a higher alert if you know that that's happening, because the fraudster could be seeing that information. And last, if the worst does happen, and if a diversion does occur in one of your transactions, the very first thing that victim needs to do is notify their banking institution immediately and issue a recall due to fraud. Okay. While they're talking to their bank requesting that recall, they should also see if that bank will reach out to the receiving financial institution to freeze that incoming account. Okay. You should also notify Fidelity National Title or whoever the escrow company is. And if you could provide the banking information and the details about when the wire was sent, we can attempt to reach out to the receiving bank as well through our banking contacts. Okay. The victim also should go to the Internet Crime Complaint Center, which is an online website, www.ic3.gov, and file a complaint that way. Think of it as an intake system. So I recommend people filling it out, printing it off, and taking it then to the local authorities. All right. You can go to the alta.org website, and on the magnifying glass that signifies search, go ahead and type in rapid response plan. And that will go ahead and give you a Word document that lists through the steps to take. The reason why it may be a good idea for you guys to have that, even though it's kind of geared towards title settlement agents, is because the steps are the same regardless of who you are and who the victim is. And it helps keep everyone going. Emotions are very high when something like this happens. So it's nice to have those steps in front of you. All right, our motto, inquire before you wire. It's important to remember that an invention from 1876 can actually solve this 2021 problem, right? We just have to, things aren't right, pick up the phone and call. Before I take action on an email, I'm going to pick up the phone and call. And the more we can encourage that, the better it is for everyone involved. So any additional questions? Oh, let's see, there's one here. Do you know that if they are scamming programs like HomeLight, Glide, et cetera, containing several disclosures and documents from different, I haven't seen any of those happening. The question is, do you know if they are scamming programs like HomeLight, Glide, et cetera, containing several disclosures and documents from different transactions? I haven't seen it, but I wouldn't put it past them. They are ever evolving. And as soon as they figure out a new niche or a new thing that we as an industry are doing, they're finding a way into it. Like, for example, at the beginning, before 2020, we weren't seeing too much in refinances. But as 2020 hit, and that was pretty much all we were seeing was refinances, the fraudsters found a way in. They weren't previously going after the mortgage brokers and the notaries, but they started because that was their way in. So it's important to remember that they'll always evolve, and they'll always use whatever they have. And if they can gain access to any of those sites and get that, then they will use that to their advantage.
Thank you, Krista. I appreciate that. My gosh, that was so much good information. I learned so much. That was really great. Thank you. I just want to thank everybody for attending and being a part of this really important, informative session. Please consider opening your next escrow with one of our amazing Rockstar escrow units within our 4-county operation of Lake, Mendocino, Napa, and Sonoma. Our teams really are the best at what they do, so always insist on Fidelity National Title for all your title and escrow needs. And I just want to give a very special thank you to our county manager, Jennifer Hall, for all that she does and for helping us get this class going. And again, thanks everybody for coming. And please reach out to your sales executive if you have an idea in mind of an upcoming class. We'd be happy to accommodate that. So thanks again.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. We appreciate you.
Thank you, Krista.
You're welcome.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Vivian. Thanks, Kyra. Thanks, everybody. Krista.
Of course. Have a good day, everyone.
You too. Bye.
Bye.